Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. I'm going to talk about a couple things, but before I go into my usual thing, I'm just going to say I almost never talk about myself or what I've done, but last week I took a week off of the show and I did something that I really liked. And I invited my mother, my sainted mother, over to Tucson for a few days. And I took her out and we got her oral history. Now, you can make fun of that all you want, but what that really is you sit down and you get you have a person interviewing. And we did the first hour actually on videotape and the rest on audio tape. And you basically go through a series of questions that causes a person to go through their entire life history. I learned things about my own mom I didn't know myself. So it was just great. Anybody who does have a parent or a relative who's getting up there in years or who has a friend, hopefully healthy, but if they're not, and if you're afraid of losing them, and you want a record of their life, and they want their friends and relatives to have a record of their life, oral history is the way to go. And basically, it fits everybody into, we're all inside history, whether we like it or not. Tucson was a city in the Old West. Now it's a growing suburb. People moved here. Everybody moved here for a reason. I came with a certain aerospace migration. Other people came here for other reasons and had other jobs and so on and so forth. And basically it puts people into their context in history, how'd they get to America, how'd they get to where they were born, what did their parents do, any family stories about their families, how their families come to America, and then what they did and how they did it, who they married, how many times did they marry, and what was their relationship with their friends, their relatives, who did things, what influenced them, and so on and so forth. For me, it was just great. I was there. I participated in the whole interview, and I think that I really learned a lot. And I know that my children and my grandchildren will have a record not only of what she sounded like, but what she thought about, and also, at least for the first hour, which covered her whole childhood up to marriage, to see her talking about herself. So for me, it was just great. I'm going to see if I can get convince my dad to do it too, and I don't know whether I will. Hopefully, I can, and maybe someday I might do it myself. So it's called Oral History. Basically, the whole program, I think, is put on by NPR. They're collecting histories of people and families from throughout the entire country. I chose to upgrade it a little bit and go video, at least for the first hour. And it was just amazing how much there was out there and how much she had to say and how much I learned, not only about my own mom, but about my own family and my own family history. And I think a lot of those stories throughout the people, no matter how white bread you might be or whatever, every family has family stories that are fascinating and unbelievable that you absolutely would not expect. Even my generation, which is, of course, baby boom, for all you know, your brother was a hippie, and you'll only find out about it when you get an oral history or whatever. So for me, it was just a great experience, and I encourage people to do that. It's not the topic of the day, but that's certainly something that I did, and if everybody watches my show, or anybody watches it, for all of my many viewers, if you saw the same show 2 weeks in a row, that's why. For me, today is Friday, May 4th. For you, it'll probably be the 7th or the 8th, or possibly next Sunday. And as I always say, there's a delay. Anything I talk about is going to be obsolete. And however, this is live to tape, which means if I fall off my chair right now, you're going to see me fall off my chair Tuesday or Sunday or in reruns sometime in the future. Okay, I'm going to talk about something, and I'm going to press the button over here. Well, first of all, I'm going to do my traditional turning of the earth and putting America over here on my shoulder. Today I'll be talking about this area right in here, which is the beautiful state of Michigan. Why? Because today's subject is importing oil. It's global warming. I am not a big global warming fan, but if global warming will lead to a increase in mileage, a reduction in oil imports, and lessening our dependence on the Middle East and on my pet peeve individual, who is Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. He's the guy I like to dislike, and I think is going to be one of the great threats to America. I have a form right over here that I got from the Energy Information Administration, which is the official energy statistics from the U.S. government. And this particular document says that Venezuela is our fourth largest importer, or we import fourth largest amount of oil and oil products from Venezuela. And we import both crude oil and refined products, 1,360,000 barrels a day from Hugo Chavez, and that should produce for him approximately $80 million every single day from our hides in order to use against us. I've already talked about quite a bit in the past that he's developed satellites who were very, very slowly taking over their countries through referenda, changing their constitution, reducing the power of their opponents, taking over the military. And down here in Bolivia, which is a natural gas producing country, and Ecuador, and also our old friends, the Sandinistas, he sponsored in an election over here in Nicaragua. Basically, the only way we're going to get independent is to become independent. And that's why I'm going to talk right now. A lot of you out there have listened and listened, and you're going to hear about peak oil. What is peak oil? Peak oil says that, oh my God, there's only so much oil in the ground, and we are at the maximum possible production of it. The Chinese and the Indians are going to use more and more and more in the third world, and that is going to drive up the prices. And of course, right now, why am I talking about oil? Why am I talking about gas? Because gas just hit $3 a gallon right here in Arizona. It's outrageous. Basically, the margin between the per gallon value of the crude oil price and the price at the pump has doubled since it started skyrocketing a few years ago. So all this stuff that, oh my God, it's so hard to produce oil, it's so hard to refine it, we don't have very many refineries and so on and so forth. My opinion is that's garbage. And I'm going to show you why by clicking this button. What this button is going to do, it's going to go to a chart, what we call the Elmo. So don't be too shocked and surprised if you hear my disembodied voice over it. What this is, and I put this together, I'm going to detitle over here. And this is a chart that I put together, again, based on the Energy Information Administration. And what it is the total oil inputs to the entire refining industry. So these are the amount of crude oil that goes to every refinery within America, and it becomes our diesel oil, it becomes our the oil or the product that we use. It's a kind of kerosene. J8 goes into jet fuel, goes into the diesel that runs the trucks and a few Mercedes-Benz cars. Goes for the oil, the crankcase oil and every other oil product. So here it is. And the interesting thing about it is if you look at it and you look at 1979, you'll see that little bump over there in the front, that was 15 million barrels a day. And if you look over at 2001, and actually it peaks there, I only have the figures through 2005, peaks at 2004 at almost exactly the same amount as in 1979. So what does this mean? This means that we are not using any more crude oil for the entire refining industry than we did in 1979. And 1979 was the peak. It had been driven up after the first oil embargo, which was 1973. It had been driven up to 1979. 1979 was the very beginning of the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis. And what happened was, and I'm going to show this again, between 1979 and 1982 was a reduction of 20% in the amount of oil that went through all the refineries in the United States. So in actuality, we reduced the amount of oil, crude oil, that was used in refineries in the United States by 20% in the 5 years between 1979 and 1983. So what does this mean? This means, first of all, that the increase in the use of oil, at least within the United States, is almost stagnant. It's gone up 20% from its bottom, but its bottom was already 20% lower than the top, than our capacity in 1979. And the reason is because the CAFE standards during the 80s, during the Reagan administration, were increased, and we became much more efficient as far as our energy use in electricity. We transferred to domestic sources. And what are domestic sources? Oil, natural gas. And we actually decreased the amount of oil, crude oil, that was used to drive our cars. And you have to take into account that we probably transport almost double the number of goods that we did in 1979. And yet, because of the increased efficiency of trains, increased efficiency of trucks, so on and so forth, we actually are at the same level. So all those that say, oh, if I look, we have gone up at such and such a rate, it's going to be, our oil is going to increase 3 or 4% a year, actually, we are dead stagnant. And the only reason we've gone up in the last 10 years back up to the level that we were in 1979 is simply because we went to larger and larger SUVs, larger and larger trucks, and that our average mileage actually went the other way, at least for a few years. Now, every single ad I see shows mileage. Toyota, the Prius, which is hybrid. Right now, I look at the, even the SUVs are advertising 25 to 30 miles a gallon, whereas before, people were buying SUVs, big Hummers and stuff like that, 9 to 12 miles a gallon. I believe that we are not at peak oil. Peak oil basically says the price of oil is going to go up virtually infinitely because there's not enough oil in the world, which is a lie, that oil production is going down. Yes, it's going down in the United States. Now, I don't know how much of that is due to the oil companies preferring to import. but it is not going down worldwide. That is pure, utter garbage. And that is garbage that's very, very damaging because it leads people to believe that when the price of gas goes to $3, that the oil companies are not making a fortune off of it. In fact, they are taking the shirts off of our back. Let me say one thing more. These companies, the oil import industry, is probably the largest threat to our national security right now. And even more so, they are an unpatriotic bunch of thieves. I'm going to be blunt about that because I really believe it. They are importing oil and forcing our money to go to our enemies, and then they are increasing their margin. In other words, their profit 3 to 4-fold in the last 5 years. There is no excuse for it. There is no such thing as peak oil. In fact, what we're seeing here now is peak demand. Now, a lot of that peak demand, and what do I mean by peak demand? I mean that in the next 5 years, there's going to be another 20% decrease in the amount of crude oil that is used within this country. Why? Because people are choosing to increase their average mileage, and they are, and the car companies are going to be forced to comply. What is forcing the car companies to comply? Well, first of all, during the 90s, GM, which actually is probably one of the best companies in the 80s and 90s for developing cars with alternative fuels throughout the world. It's GM that developed the flex fuel that uses ethanol, and they have big plants down in Brazil. They completely adapted Brazil away from imported oil. I've already talked about Brazil going to Bolivian natural gas and getting messed over by Morales, who's a clone or a satellite of Venezuela's Hugo Chavez. But however, they are virtually independent in imported, as far as imported oil is concerned, where we have gone from importing about a quarter of our needs back in the 70s to importing 60% right now. However, even more. However, we produce about 7. Our total production, our total use is about, I had another form that said it was 20 plus, and that in 1979 we were at 19.9. It's probably more accurate just to look at what is going into inputting to the refineries within the country in order to see what that level is. So the fact of the matter is that we've gone from 1/3 to 2/3, for all intents and purposes, imports. However, if you take into account NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association, add Canada and Mexico, our 2 biggest sources of oil outside of the United States, we import 4 million barrels a day from them, and that brings us up to approximately over almost 60% of our needs within NAFTA. And they have discovered tremendous amounts, about 30 billion barrels of proven oil reserves here, deep oil in the Gulf. Plus, there's another 1 million barrels a day probably coming in online up here, which is tar sands. And then, of course, we have behind us, depending on what we're going to do about it, tremendous amount of oil shale over here in Utah, Montana, and thereabouts. One field alone is over 1 trillion barrels of oil. So peak oil, they're running out of oil, running out of fossil fuels, price is going to go through the roof. That is garbage. Does that mean that we shouldn't get off of fossil fuels if we can? Yes, we should. And one of the things that's driving what I call peak demand, which means that, again, as in 1979 and 1983, where America is actually going to reduce the amount of oil that we use, and that is going to come straight out of the hides of the Middle East, and Americans are sick of importing oil from the Middle East, being dependent on that, and Venezuela and Ecuador, countries that are proving to be our enemies, is because of Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people. What Arnold Schwarzenegger did, he signed a bill, basically, that said that California is going to set its own carbon emissions. And in the course of that, the easiest way to get carbon down is to burn less fossil fuels. And within a week, and I'm not kidding about this, after the signing of this document, there was a big car show in New York, followed by another big car show in Belgium. GM came out with a plug-in hybrid. That's a hybrid that you plug in at night. You plug into your electric plug at night, and it charges it up. The first 40 miles of your day's outing is completely off of the battery. The rest is done at hybrid. You can get up to 175 miles a gallon by using this plug-in hybrid system. Ford, Toyota, of course, has the Prius, and they've been working a different kind of hybrid scheme. This plug-in hybrid, the gas engine, which is still there, actually physically runs the drive shaft. That's called serial instead of parallel. Parallel is both systems do the. Oh no, I'm sorry. The gas engine does not drive the drive shaft. That's in the regular system. All it does is charge out the battery, and an electric motor drives the drive shaft. And that's the one. Those will be the ones that will have the super mileage. Does that actually save carbon? Well, it's hard to say because you're using electricity. Of course, if you have natural gas, which puts off very little carbon, then yes, it does save carbon. But what it really saves is it substitutes domestic energy sources for imported, because we don't import electricity. Our sources of electricity are either nuclear, but there's mostly coal, or natural gas. We produce all those in abundance within the United States, and we don't need to get any of it from Saudi Arabia, from Iran, from Venezuela. Hugo Chavez is Venezuela, or from any other country. Let me just show, just for our benefit, how much oil are we importing from the Middle East? This particular website showing the latest, which is February of 2007, the month before last. Basically, Saudi Arabia is the third largest. I'm going to do all petroleum products. Actually, Venezuela beats Saudi Arabia in that case. 1.2 million. Algeria, 555,000 barrels a day. Iraq, 325,000. And the good news is that Iran has been forced off the top 15, which is good news. But Russia is back on, another really great friend of ours lately, at 241,000 barrels a day. So basically, we are, and of course our third largest import of oil is from Hugo Chavez's Venezuela, 1,360,000 barrels a day. Every single day, $80 to $90 million a day going directly into the pockets of somebody who's trying to toss the United States and the American people and our interests out of Latin America, and actually sponsoring his satellites to run for office, put in referenda to alter the constitutions, and then to rule by decree, take over the army, take over the media, and set up socialist states within 2 years of an election. So that's basically what I'm talking about today. I'm going to go to this again. Notice, right now we use no more crude oil for all of our refining than we did in 1979. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride, I'm a federal employee and proud of it. I'm on Tuesdays and Sundays, and please watch my show.